In the year 922 AD, a Muslim diplomat named Ahmad ibn Fadlan witnessed something that would haunt him forever. While traveling through the lands of the Rus, Viking raiders from the north, he observed a funeral ritual so disturbing, it reads like a horror script. A young slave girl, chosen to accompany her dead master to the afterlife, was paraded, violated, drugged, and finally stabbed and burned alive, her death scene, as a sacred act of devotion. This isn't fiction. These are documented historical accounts. Eyewitness reports, archaeological discoveries, and ancient sagas reveal a terrifying truth. The Vikings used sexuality not only as ritual but as war, control, and spectacle. What you're about to hear is real history. Disturbing, graphic, and deeply unsettling history. Sexuality as social hierarchy. In Viking culture, your sexual position wasn't just intimate, it defined your legal status and personal honor. The terms rega and aga were used to describe men seen as sexually passive or effeminate. Being accused of this could get you legally killed with no consequences to the accuser. This wasn't just about insults. If a man was rumored to be unmanly in bed, he could lose property, reputation, and even the right to bear arms. Blood feuds erupted over whispered slights. Entire sagas describe warriors who murdered others simply for questioning their masculinity. And women weren't passive bystanders, they weaponized this system. Wives could publicly shame husbands for being too gentle, and such accusations held real legal and social consequences. Sex as warfare. Vikings didn't just conquer with swords. They used sexual humiliation as psychological warfare. One brutal practice, known as the involved stabbing the buttocks of a defeated enemy to symbolize forced penetration. An act meant to destroy not just the body, but the very essence of masculine identity. In some cases, Viking warriors didn't stop at symbolism. Captured kings were publicly raped to prove dominance and strip them of power. Victims were so humiliated, they often committed suicide or were exiled from their own community. Sexual slavery and mass exploitation. The Vikings ran an industrial-scale system of sexual enslavement. In places like Dublin and York, slave markets thrived, filled with captives, sorted by beauty and value. The most desirable were kept for personal pleasure by elite warriors. Viking laws were explicit. Rape of a free woman could mean death. Rape of a slave, a small fine equal to damaging livestock. Archaeological studies suggest slaves made up 30% of some populations, many exploited specifically for sex. This wasn't a fringe practice, it was a cultural institution. Public sex, legal sex, ritual sex. Viking weddings were legal contracts enforced by sexual performance. Without witness consummation, a marriage was void. If the bride wasn't a virgin or the groom couldn't perform, families could sue for fraud. Bridal crowns were removed in public. Beds were blessed by family and priests, and in some cases, relatives even stayed in the room to verify the act. Bloody sheets from the wedding night were preserved as legal proof. Everything was transactional. Marriage, sex, honor, it was all a public performance, watched, judged, and enforced by law. The afterlife orgies. According to Ibn Fadlan, the death of a Viking chieftain became a sexual spectacle. Slave girls were chosen to die with him, told they'd join him in Valhalla. Before death, they were intoxicated and raped repeatedly, act believed to transfer life force into the dead man's spirit. The final ritual. A drugged girl is stabbed and strangled as chants echo around her. Her corpse burned beside the chief's body in a funeral ship. Modern archaeology confirms this isn't myth. Women's remains found in high-status Viking graves often show signs of violent death. Women, empowered and enslaved. The Viking paradox. Free women could divorce their husbands, own land, and choose lovers. But enslaved women had no rights and could be used sexually by any free man. This brutal contrast was intentional. It reinforced that freedom meant control over one's body, and slavery meant total surrender. Even baby girls weren't safe. Families would abandon or kill daughters they couldn't afford to raise. Same-sex relations and gender rules. Homosexuality wasn't forbidden, but it had rules. As long as a man was the penetrator, his masculinity stayed intact. The passive role, however, meant disgrace. Even gods weren't exempt. Loki gave birth. Odin practiced female-associated magic and was mocked for it. Insults around masculinity carried harsher punishments than many violent crimes. Vikings viewed sexual dominance as the ultimate form of power, and any deviation was treated as treason to manhood. Sexual violence as entertainment. Vikings turned sexual violence into public theater. Executions of rapists involved ironic punishments, often including public humiliation and assault. Adulterers were castrated before cheering crowds. At festivals, prisoners were subjected to degrading sexual torture for sport. The sagas describe games where victims were forced to perform acts for amusement. There's suffering feeding Viking blood, legacy of brutality. The Vikings didn't just raid, they reshaped Europe with their twisted ideas of honor, dominance, and sexuality. Their methods weren't random, they were strategic. A weaponized system where sex was a tool of power, control, and conquest. And many of these ancient values still echo in modern laws, masculinity ideals, and cultural attitudes today. What other historical sexual practices would shock modern audiences? Leave a comment below and tell me what civilization you'd like me to explore next. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark history uncovered.